Céline Figard was born on May 23, 1976, in the small French town of Besançon, a quiet community located near the border with Switzerland. She grew up in a warm and close-knit household, raised by her parents alongside her two brothers and one sister. Her father worked as a farmer, and much of Céline's childhood was spent helping him out in the fields with her siblings. At school, she was outgoing, athletic, and well-liked, often participating in sports and surrounded by friends. When she was just 14 years old, her parents took her on a trip to nearby Britain, a journey that left a lasting impression on her. That visit sparked a dream in Céline. One day, she hoped to move to the UK. Motivated by this ambition, she chose a field of study that would allow her to pursue a career in hospitality, inspired in part by a cousin who worked as a hotel manager in England. After completing high school, Céline enrolled in a local university to study accounting. She continued visiting her cousin in the UK whenever she could, strengthening her ties to the country she longed to live in. One summer, her cousin helped her secure a job at a British hotel, where she worked temporarily before returning to France. By the end of 1995, 19-year-old Céline made plans to travel back to Britain for the Christmas holidays. At the time, public transportation in France was experiencing significant delays and disruptions due to strikes. So, her parents arranged for her to ride with a family friend, a truck driver who was delivering goods to England. He agreed to drop her off in Folkestone, from where she would make her way to Fordingbridge, the town where her cousin lived. On the 18th of December, Céline left home with plans to reach her cousin's hotel later that evening. Her parents expected a phone call from her once she arrived safely. But as the night dragged on and no call came, they began to worry. Céline didn't own a mobile phone, which meant her family could only wait and hope. Eventually, the phone rang, but it wasn't Céline. It was her cousin, calling to say that she had not arrived and asking if there had been a change in plans. Now deeply concerned, her parents contacted the French police. Authorities in France quickly reached out to British police, who immediately launched a missing persons investigation. Céline's parents traveled to England to assist with the search and told investigators about the family friend who had driven her to Folkestone. The driver was located and confirmed he had dropped Céline off as planned before continuing on his route. While at the truck stop, he recalled speaking with another French trucker who was heading toward Newbury, only about an hour from Fordingbridge. This second driver offered to take Céline closer to her cousin's home. British authorities tracked him down as well, and he told them he had dropped Céline off at a truck stop in Newbury. She had tried to call her cousin from a payphone, but for some reason wasn't able to get through. By then, it was around 4:30 p.m. The driver had suggested she take a train, but the nearest station was too far, and he couldn't take her since his delivery was in another direction. Wanting to help, he asked other drivers at the truck stop if anyone could give her a lift. The first driver he asked declined. He was resting before heading out. But a third driver stepped forward and said he was going to Salisbury, which was only a 30-minute drive from Fordingbridge. He told Céline she might be able to catch an 8 p.m. bus from there. With no better options, Céline accepted the ride. That was the last time anyone saw her alive. Police tried to track down the third driver, but had little to go on. The second trucker who had handed her over couldn't remember the license plate, only that the vehicle was a white Mercedes truck. He gave a description of the man, about 35 years old, with short blonde hair and a beard. He also admitted something about the man seemed off. His mannerisms were strange, and it left him uneasy. Despite his gut feeling, he let Céline go with the driver because she had no other choice. Investigators grew increasingly suspicious that the third driver was involved in her disappearance. Using the witness description, they created a composite sketch and released it to the media. The first two truckers were cleared. Both had solid alibis and were in completely different locations during the critical hours. Then, detectives uncovered something alarming. The third driver had told Céline she could take a bus from Salisbury to Fordingbridge around 8 p.m., but that bus service didn't exist. Authorities intensified their search, distributing the composite sketch and Céline's story through British and French news outlets. The timing of her disappearance, just before Christmas, amplified public interest and concern. Adding to the fear, police were already investigating a possible serial killer in the region, connected to the deaths of several young women in recent years. Now they feared Céline might be his latest victim. A massive search effort was launched involving over 100 officers, helicopters, and even a plane scanning the countryside. The focus was on the suspected route the third trucker may have taken. But despite their efforts, no trace of Celine was found. The first week yielded nothing. Her family and the police made public appeals, asking anyone with information to come forward. Dozens of leads came in, but none led to answers. Then, on the morning of the 29th of December, a local man driving near Worcester pulled over to adjust his windshield wipers. While walking along the roadside, he noticed something unusual sticking out of the snow. Curious, he approached and realized, to his horror, that it was a human body. He rushed home and called the police. Officers responded quickly and confirmed it was the body of a young woman. At first, they weren't sure who she was. They initially suspected it could be a local woman who had vanished after leaving a nightclub, but that theory was soon ruled out. On the 30th of December, police officially confirmed the worst. The body was Celine Figured. Her cousin was brought in to make the heartbreaking identification, sparing her parents from that trauma. One disturbing detail quickly emerged. The spot where Celine's body was found was in the opposite direction of where she had been headed. That only solidified suspicion that the third truck driver had murdered her. None of her clothes or personal items were recovered at the scene. The autopsy revealed multiple bruises and injuries consistent with blunt force trauma, as well as signs of strangulation. There was also evidence of sexual assault, but no recoverable DNA was found. A chilling conclusion emerged. Her body had likely been left by the roadside just 24 hours before being discovered. That meant Celine had been missing for 11 days, raising the disturbing possibility that the killer had kept her alive or preserved her body. The second driver had mentioned that the third truck had a refrigeration unit, possibly an industrial freezer. This led police to suspect the killer had stored her body inside his truck while continuing to make deliveries. But there were still no solid leads on who he was. Then, her parents mentioned Celine had brought 2 bottles of rare French champagne as Christmas gifts. Those bottles, along with all her belongings, were missing. Since that particular champagne wasn't available in the UK, investigators hoped it might lead to a breakthrough. They released photos of the brand to the press, asking the public if anyone had seen or received bottles like them. Sadly, that effort led nowhere. With few leads, police took a bold step. Despite having no DNA from the suspect, they launched the UK's first mass DNA screening. They focused on drivers of Mercedes trucks with refrigerated units. Over a month, more than 5,000 truck drivers were tested. Most complied, but some refused, and those men were flagged for deeper investigation. Meanwhile, the case stayed in the headlines, and tips continued to pour in from both Britain and France. Still, none brought them closer to solving the case. That changed in mid-February, when one tip finally broke the silence. A man contacted police after recognizing the sketch. It looked like a co-worker, 36-year-old truck driver Stuart William Harling. Stuart drove a white Mercedes lorry with a refrigeration unit. Detectives began looking into him. Though his criminal history included only minor offenses, his refusal to provide a DNA sample immediately raised red flags. Eventually, under pressure, Stuart gave a sample. Detectives then secured a warrant to search his truck. Inside, they found traces of blood in the sleeping area. Testing confirmed it was Celine's blood. That alone was enough for an arrest. Police also searched Stuart's garage. There, they found Celine's personal belongings, the same ones she had with her when she vanished. They noticed something strange about Stuart's tachograph, the legal device used to record driving hours. The day Celine's body was dumped, he had tampered with the log to hide his movements. But he made a mistake. After dumping her body, he resumed driving without correcting the gap, leaving a suspicious hole in the record. During his first police interview, Stuart denied everything. He claimed he never met Celine. But when the second driver identified him in a lineup, Stuart changed his story. Now he admitted giving her a ride and claimed they had consensual sex. As for her belongings in his garage, he said she left them behind. Investigators didn't buy it. Then a new witness came forward. Someone had seen Stuart near a warehouse about 50 miles from where Celine's body was found. He was burning something near his truck. When police questioned him, he said he was trying to thaw frozen brakes. Officers searched the site and discovered Celine's underwear under a fence, blood-stained. Investigators now had a timeline. They believed Stuart had picked Celine up, driven her to a secluded location, assaulted her, and killed her. They believed he stored her body in the lower bunk of his cab for 10 days, all while continuing deliveries. Shockingly, he spent Christmas at home with his wife and children, while Celine's body was still in the truck. At some point, he bought a saw, an axe, and a shovel, likely planning to dismember her. But he abandoned that plan and left her body by the roadside. One final detail sealed the story. The day after Christmas, Stuart gave away the 2 rare bottles of French champagne. When questioned, he claimed he bought them from a different trucker, but police didn't believe him. They also noted that Stuart had always worn a beard, until he suddenly shaved it off, right when the sketch hit the news. As for why Celine couldn't reach her cousin, she had written down the old UK area code. It had recently changed, and her call never went through. To friends, family, and co-workers, Stuart Harling had always seemed like a devoted husband and a quiet man. But now, the mask had shattered. At first, many people found it hard to believe Stuart Harling could be responsible. He came across as quiet, unassuming, even dependable. But as news outlets began reporting the damning evidence against him, public doubt began to crumble. People were forced to confront the terrifying reality of who Stuart truly was. His trial began in October of 1996. Despite the overwhelming evidence, blood traces, witness statements, Celine's belongings in his garage, Stuart stuck to his story. He continued to deny everything, insisting he was innocent. But the jury wasn't convinced. It didn't take them long to reach a unanimous verdict: guilty of murder. The court sentenced him to life in prison, with a minimum term of 20 years before being eligible for parole. Not long after the sentencing, Stuart tried to challenge the outcome. He argued that the intense media coverage had influenced the jury, robbing him of a fair trial. But the Court of Appeal rejected that argument, standing by the original verdict. In 2006, a decade into his sentence, Stuart submitted another appeal for sentence review. That attempt also failed. Then, in 2016, the 20-year mark came, and with it, his first chance at parole. But his application was denied. The reason? Even after 2 decades behind bars, Stuart continued to deny any involvement in Celine's murder. He still refused to take responsibility. The parole board also expressed concern that he remained a potential threat to the public. As of now, Stuart Harling remains in prison, with no realistic chance of release in the near future. Meanwhile, it's important to note that Stuart was eventually ruled out in connection to the other murders that had raised alarm during Celine's disappearance. Those killings were later traced to another long-haul truck driver, who was arrested in late 1997. Though he was formally charged with only 2 murders, authorities suspect he may be responsible for more unsolved cases across the region. As for Stuart Harling, investigators once feared Celine might not have been his only victim. But despite extensive efforts, no evidence has ever surfaced to link him to any other crimes. This case serves as a stark reminder of how the truth can be hidden in plain sight, and how justice, though delayed, will eventually find its way. Mikhail Bush entered the world on the 13th of February, 1997, in Alberta, Canada. She was raised in that province alongside her parents and a younger sister, who admired her deeply and regarded her as a lifelong role model. Mikhail's warm spirit, boundless energy, and kindness naturally drew others toward her, and she was well loved among her peers. One of her earliest and strongest passions was figure skating. As a child, she often visited local ice rinks with her parents, and over time, skating became something she truly cherished. During her high school years, Mikhail met a young man named Cody. The connection was instant, and it wasn't long before they became inseparable. Their relationship grew stronger over time, and after finishing school, the two began laying the groundwork for a shared future. Mikhail soon landed a job at a nonprofit that provided support services for people with disabilities. The role sparked a deeper purpose in her, inspiring her to pursue a long-term career in healthcare. In 2017, she enrolled in a local college and began working toward a nursing degree. After completing the program, she returned to the charity organization she loved. Around that time, Mikhail discovered she was pregnant. Both she and Cody were overjoyed at the news. In a touching moment, Cody proposed to her right in the middle of an ice rink, a perfect nod to her lifelong passion. In 2020, their son Noah was born, and the couple embraced their new roles as parents. Cody, who worked in the pipeline construction industry, had a job that required constant travel across Canada. This put pressure on their family dynamic, as Mikhail and Noah often had to choose between relocating frequently or spending long stretches without him. Fortunately, a new opportunity changed everything. In 2021, Cody was offered a position that didn't require him to move from place to place. The family seized the chance to settle down and move to Hinton, a quiet town nestled in a remote area. For the first time, they had stability and a sense of permanence. In early September 2021, Mikhail and Cody moved into a cozy apartment located on the outskirts of Hinton. At the time, Mikhail was 24, and Noah was just 16 months old. Surrounded by nature and parks, the area offered a calm and peaceful environment, exactly what they had been hoping for. On the 16th of September, Cody left for work like any other day. Mikhail stayed behind to look after Noah. Cody's shift ended around 6 p.m., and he was eager to get home and spend the evening with his family. But when he arrived, the apartment was empty. Mikhail and Noah were nowhere to be found. He searched every room and even looked around outside, but there was no trace of them. At first, Cody assumed Mikhail had taken Noah for a walk, maybe to one of the nearby playgrounds. But a few things didn't add up. Their son's stroller was still inside, suggesting she hadn't taken him far. And then Cody noticed something even more unusual. Lunch had been half prepared on the kitchen counter, ingredients laid out, plates ready, as though Mikhail had been interrupted mid-task. That's when true concern set in. Cody began checking the neighborhood parks and surrounding areas, but still, there was no sign of them. Desperate for answers, he started calling friends and family. Maybe someone had picked them up? That would explain the stroller, he thought. But no one had seen Mikhail that day. He kept dialing her number, hoping she'd answer, but her phone rang endlessly without reply. The situation was becoming more and more alarming. With nowhere else to turn, Cody contacted the police. Around that same time, a friend arrived at the apartment complex to help search. Together, they scoured the surrounding areas, but came up empty. When officers arrived, they immediately joined the search. They combed through the entire complex, searched the wooded areas behind it, and canvassed the neighborhood, going door to door, in hopes that someone had seen Mikhail or Noah. Eventually, one resident offered a potential lead. The neighbor mentioned spotting a woman who looked like Mikhail running from the complex earlier that day. Curiously, she hadn't been shouting or calling for help, and Noah was not with her. Investigators decided to follow up. They requested access to surveillance footage from the building's manager. Hours of security footage were reviewed, and initially there was no sign of Mikhail. But then, something unexpected caught their attention. The same neighbor who claimed to have seen her was spotted on camera around midday, carrying 2 large garbage bags out of the building. Police rushed to the nearby dumpster to check. Inside one of the bags, they made a chilling discovery: Noah's lifeless body, along with some of Mikhail's personal items, including her phone. The gravity of the case shifted instantly. Officers understood they had to proceed with care. Mikhail was still missing, and now they had every reason to believe the neighbor was involved. They planned their next steps cautiously. The suspect lived directly next door to Mikhail's unit, where Cody and relatives were now gathered. To prevent any explosive reactions, investigators asked Cody and his family to step out under the pretense of conducting a detailed inspection. They didn't reveal the heartbreaking truth that his son had just been found discarded in a trash container mere steps away. With the apartment empty, police approached the suspect's door. He agreed to let them inside. As officers walked through his home, they headed toward the bathroom, and there they found Mikhail. She was lying in the tub, completely unclothed. The neighbor, 53-year-old Robert Major, was taken into custody immediately. Investigators were now faced with reconstructing the events that led to such horror. They began by digging into Robert's background, and what they uncovered was nothing short of horrifying. Robert had been in and out of the legal system for years. He had been charged over 24 times, mostly for sexual offenses. Despite the severity and frequency of his crimes, he had only ever served short sentences. Psychiatrists who evaluated him during his incarcerations noted that he took genuine pleasure in his actions and showed little remorse. His pattern of behavior marked him as a high-risk offender, someone very likely to strike again. Yet in 2016, he was released. The only safeguard authorities put in place was a public alert stating that Robert posed a risk. He was placed on a special offender registry and restricted from living near women or children. He was also forbidden from leaving his city and was expected to report regularly to police. But under Canadian law, if someone went a full year without reoffending, those restrictions could be lifted. That's exactly what happened. Eventually, Robert disappeared from the system's radar. At some point, he quietly relocated to Hinton and moved into a residential complex full of young families. Local police were unaware of his history. The property management had no access to his background, and residents had no idea who was living among them. As investigators awaited autopsy results, Robert made a partial confession, one that deeply disturbed even veteran detectives. Additional witness accounts and forensic evidence helped reconstruct what had happened that day. That morning, Mikhail had taken Noah out for a walk. Upon returning, the building manager stopped her for a quick chat. The concern was that Cody's muddy work boots were leaving tracks in the hallway. Mikhail assured him she'd cleaned it up. She brought Noah inside, put him down for a nap, and began making lunch. Around that time, she called a friend. The friend later recalled hearing a knock on the door mid-conversation and a man offering to help clean the hallway. The rest of the exchange was unclear, but shortly after, Mikhail ended the call and sent a message to a family member around 2 p.m. What happened next remains a mystery, as Robert never fully explained how he got her into his apartment. It's possible he lured her with a false pretense, perhaps continuing the hallway conversation or requesting her help. However it happened, Mikhail stepped inside Robert's unit, and according to his confession, he attacked her almost immediately. He attempted to strangle her but struggled for nearly 10 minutes before ultimately succeeding. He then sexually assaulted her. Afterward, he dragged her body to the bathroom. He then walked into her apartment, took Noah from his crib, and murdered him too. Robert placed Noah's body, along with Mikhail's clothes and phone, into trash bags and dumped them in a nearby bin. He left Mikhail's body in the tub. To throw investigators off, he tried to suggest that Mikhail had simply left the building and vanished. His reasoning for the murders was chilling. While his motive for killing Mikhail was clear, driven by the desire to inflict harm, Noah's death raised more questions. Authorities speculated that Robert might have killed Noah to avoid being identified, or perhaps the baby woke up crying and he feared neighbors would hear. Either way, his own psychiatric evaluations revealed a stark truth. Robert derived gratification from victimizing those weaker than himself. Even prison didn't deter him. During a previous sentence, he attacked a fellow inmate, adding more charges to his record. When this case became national news, the public was appalled, not just by the violence, but by the fact that someone like Robert had been released and left unsupervised. During the trial, shocking revelations continued to emerge. Robert had admitted openly to psychiatrists that he enjoyed committing these acts, and yet he was still allowed to roam free. His trial moved swiftly due to his admission of guilt. In a final statement before sentencing, Robert stunned the court once more. He confessed that he should remain behind bars for life, as even he feared what he might do if released again. Still, he insisted that he viewed himself as a good person. Ultimately, Robert received a life sentence. However, under Canadian law, he will be eligible for parole in 25 years. By then, he'll be 78, and still potentially dangerous. As for Mikhail's family, they've turned their grief into advocacy. They're fighting for a new law in Noah's name. The proposed legislation calls for lifelong monitoring of repeat offenders and a publicly accessible registry to help families know who's living near them. But progress has been painfully slow. Despite public support and years of effort, the bill has yet to pass, and the question remains, will justice ever fully be served for Mikhail and Noah?